How's it going, everyone? It's been an interesting last couple of days. We had the largest liquidation in history. Of course, as time goes by, as market caps grow, liquidations will get larger and larger and records will always be broken. But this is still quite interesting. The largest liquidation because of a tweet. Combine that with the market has been pushing lately. We've seen Bitcoin working towards its all-time high, Ethereum working near its all-time high, its last cycle high. A lot of risk on has been rallying lately, and I think that did aid in this massive amount of liquidations and this just massive knee-jerk reaction, in my opinion. Now, what are we seeing here today? Well, the Bitcoin ETF see an explosive start with a $2.6 billion worth of volume in just the first 2 hours. And also, what's really interesting here is the Bitcoin ETF volume surpassed 1 billion within just the first 10 minutes. This is a very good sign after seeing such a rough day on Friday. This restores a little bit of confidence instead of seeing just more red, more pain, and more fear, further cementing that beginning of a bad trend. We're seeing a good day. We're seeing some recovery. And I do think BlackRock is still on track to get very close to 1 million Bitcoin held. Right now they're at 804,000 Bitcoin, holding $93 billion worth of Bitcoin. I do believe by the end of the cycle, we're going to get very close to seeing them with 1 million Bitcoin held, continuing to take the supply away, along with the Microstrategies of the world. We will continue to see these large companies acquire more and more Bitcoin, and that'll make it harder and harder for us to be able to buy one single Bitcoin ever in our lifetime. Last cycle, in my opinion, was the last cycle that retail investors could arguably acquire one Bitcoin themselves. Back when Bitcoin was like 15, 20, 30,000. Now you've got to be relatively wealthy to be able to acquire one whole Bitcoin. Something that is a very distant dream for most. Most people nowadays will never be able to acquire another Bitcoin at any point in their life, and that's very sad. MicroStrategy also announced buying some Bitcoin. They gave their Monday announcement, and they only bought 220 more Bitcoin. This puts them at 640,000 Bitcoin. Give it a couple years and you'll see them at 1 million Bitcoin as well, just like BlackRock. This 640,000 Bitcoin is 3.1% of Bitcoin supply. This is just one company that holds 3% of Bitcoin. If you didn't know, the vast majority of Bitcoin is already in circulation. Of the 21 million Bitcoin, what we have left to mine is about 1.5 million Bitcoin. These large companies will continue to acquire more, and it will be that much harder to ever own one Bitcoin. Now, looking at MicroStrategy on the chart, last thing we saw a while ago was this bullish divergence. We saw the RSI picking up while the price went lower. We did see a spike right after that. However, we did start selling off when we were unable to reclaim the 50 and the 200 MA. We also saw a death cross here, not typically a good sign. On a positive note for MicroStrategy, we did see a higher high. We also see potentially a higher low if we can hold this level here. In the end, MicroStrategy really needs Bitcoin support. Bitcoin needs to be breaking out, pushing new all-time highs for MicroStrategy to see some hype. Otherwise, it's just going to kind of flail around. MicroStrategy is about 44% down from its high that it set earlier in the cycle. I do think if you like MicroStrategy for the long term, it is a buy. That doesn't mean it won't go lower. It can definitely go lower. Although we are late in the cycle and things are kind of risky buying at this point, I do see MicroStrategy personally as a buy, especially if you're looking to build it out over the next 6 months to a year, just slowly kind of DCAing on it. I would start buying here. I think it's a decent buy. We could definitely see it much lower in price, of course, if Bitcoin tanks, but right now MicroStrategy doesn't have an insane premium to the amount of Bitcoin held. I do think there's some value there. And of course, if Bitcoin does start pumping, I would expect MicroStrategy to outperform. Now, looking at Bitcoin, funny enough, after we got this massive drop, after we failed 120, we got this tanking of the market. We broke the 50 MA. We kind of held up this area here that we've been in since April of 2025. We have been in this multi-month trend, and we held it up actually. Funny enough, despite all this fear, despite this sell-off, we are back basically where we were in the beginning of October. So we're basically flat on October, and we're back where we started. I mean, Bitcoin's $115,000. It is like a 8% move from all-time highs. I do think we will test all-time highs this month. What I want to see is Bitcoin reclaim this 50 MA, not drop right back under it and test this support line. I'd want to see it hold the 50 MA and start getting our momentum back towards 120,000. We also saw a bullish divergence on the 4-hour here. We saw the RSI picking up from being heavily oversold. Hopefully someone was able to actually take advantage and buy this pain, buy when Bitcoin is oversold, buy when your favorite stocks are selling off, and when there's a lot of fear, when you get a massive knee-jerk reaction like this, typically it turns out to be a buying opportunity. And we did see a bullish divergence, higher lows on the RSI, but pretty much flattening out here on Bitcoin's chart here. You know, funny enough, we've never really seen a massive dump on October on a peak year. We are in 2025. This is a peak year for Bitcoin, or it should be based on the cycles. And, you know, the 2017 peak, it was pretty much up only in October. The 2021 peak, it was pretty much up only in October. We did see a September flash crash, but we did, interestingly, in the very beginning of October, back in 2013 peak, we did see like a little flash crash here. It looks like it wasn't massive, but Bitcoin was $129 and it dumped all the way to like 80 something dollars. So Bitcoin in the matter of like a day or two had like a 35% drop. And then right after that, it recovered, it broke all-time highs, and it rallied like crazy. So while this isn't typical of the most recent past cycles, normally it's up only in October, I do believe this was a time to take advantage, by this knee-jerk reaction, by this pain, by this fear. One thing to also think about, kind of rambling away here, but one thing to think about, you know, is if we don't see a typical cycle, if we don't rally into the rest of October, into November, into the year, into December, if we start tanking, if we start dropping, maybe the cycles play out differently. You have to be able to adjust. You need to be ready to, you know, take advantage if Bitcoin starts absolutely tanking. Maybe we get into crypto winter early. You got to be agile. When times are great, you want to take some profits. When times are bad, you want to accumulate more. If we do see things keep tanking in October, November, if we see the cycle basically finished off early, then I do believe this would be a buying opportunity, and maybe we go higher in 2026. The cycles don't have to always play out, although throughout history we have seen them play out. I'm still expecting a great end of this year, unless proven otherwise. I plan on trimming into strength, trimming during the good days, and buying during the fearful times, buying when there's extra fear. If we see things looking really bad throughout October, November, and December, you know, those, in my opinion, will be buying opportunities. But let me know what you guys think about that. Are you trying to be flexible? Are you trying to look at the potential opportunities? Are you looking at the what ifs? What if we don't peak this year? What if we don't rally higher and just end on euphoria at like $150,000 to $180,000 Bitcoin? And if 125K was the top, you got to ask yourself, you know, when am I going to start buying again? If things just start tanking, when do I start adding? Because if we get a drop earlier in the cycle than we normally would, then things will probably recover also earlier in the cycle than they normally would. Typically, you get that peak year, and then you get a good year and a half of fantastic opportunities to accumulate Bitcoin. So, in my opinion, 2026 would be the year to start reaccumulating Bitcoin heavy. Maybe we drop to our previous cycle peak of $70,000 roughly, or drop near there, kind of like what we see every cycle. We drop right around to our previous cycle peak, usually drop under it. For example, the 2017 peak was like $20,000. In 2022, we did drop under our $20,000 peak from last cycle. We dropped down to $15,000. So maybe this cycle we don't hold $70,000. We drop a little bit lower than that. But you know, you want to be ready with some cash. You want to trim during these good times when there's euphoria, when there's excitement, when everyone is saying we're going to go up only, when everyone is saying, you know, you got to buy these overbought stocks. You got to buy while everything's overbought. You know, usually those are the times you want to take advantage and trim, at least trim, and be prepared with some cash when things aren't going good, when people are fearful, when the market is in a panic. In reality, you know, we're still following this trend. In my opinion, there's no reason yet to think that the cycle won't play out as it always has. Like I said, we're like at 8% away from all-time high. Bitcoin can do this in a matter of days. Also, we do have something coming up. We have the Fed meeting, and we're looking at a 97% almost probability of another cut. Typically, you see risk-on assets rally while we're in a cutting cycle, which we are in. Now, I also wanted to mention, you know, with this government shutdown, there's a lot of data that we're missing out on. However, we do have CPI coming. It's going to be at a different date because the Labor Department is going to be releasing this. It was originally planned to pause work on the CPI due to the shutdown, but on October 24, we're going to get CPI. So that's going to be very interesting, important to watch for. But yeah, how are you guys feeling over the last couple of days? Have you been taking advantage of this panic? There's a lot of people that couldn't even make transactions because of issues with Coinbase, so on and so forth. Hopefully you guys were able to take advantage and buy a little bit of pain, buy a little bit of fear. What do you think about the cycle? Do you think the cycle will be broken? Do you think the next crypto winter won't really be a typical crypto winter? Or do you think things could be even worse? Do you think we top out in 2025, or do you think we top out later in 2026 or something for some reason? I believe in the cycle until proven otherwise, and the last couple of days, in my opinion, hasn't changed my thoughts on the cycle. I do think we're still set to hit 150K this year, and this is crypto. Things change on a drop of a dime. One day you could be sitting at like 120 something thousand, the next day you're sitting at like 100,000. One day you're sitting at 40,000 and then you get some massive news and then you're sitting at 70,000. Bitcoin is volatile. It is still speculative, and I personally think the market was looking for a reason to absolutely dump. Things were getting a little overheated. There was a lot of excitement, a lot of euphoria, a lot of bulls, very few bears. But anyways, how are you guys feeling about the last couple of days? Thanks as always for watching, and I'll catch you tomorrow.